From the vistas of the Grand Tetons, we welcome you to Lost River Legends. Our motto, Ex Tenebris, Latin for out from the shadows. Here we discuss Bigfoot, skinwalkers, UFOs, aliens, and other paranormal topics. We want you to join us in seeking that which is hidden and obscured from our view. We hope you enjoy the show and encourage you to reach out to us at lostriverlegends@gmail.com to share your story and leave us a message. You can also reach us at lostriverlegends.com to find access to all of our episodes, guest bios, show notes, and our blog. Prepare yourself and get settled in and comfortable as your hosts, James and Brett, enter into the realm of shadows. Enjoy the show.
And you know, there's a new name. It's unexplained aerial phenomenon. Unexplained aerial phenomenon.
Phenomenon. Phenomenon. Phenomenon. Phenomenon.
Phenomenon. Phenomenon. Phenomenon. Phenomenon.
Welcome to Lost River Legends. We are going to take a little bit of an aside and do what's, I don't know what we would call a housekeeping or a catch-up episode where we're just going to riff and update you on where we're at with things. It's been a while since we haven't had a guest. I don't know if that's the best way to put that.
Yeah, no, I mean, we have guests, and we just kind of have a little bit of a space in between the guests, the guest episode, and our next chapter of Lost River Legends, where we're moving from Bigfoot into UFOs, aliens, and whatnot. And so this is going to be this episode is really going to be the turning point for those episodes that are going to be coming out from now on. For the next little while. We don't know how long that might last, but it's just kind of update to let you know how the show's going, where we're at with like 2019, and the next number of episodes we have lined up are going to be like UFO based, alien abduction possibly. We're just kind of figuring things out right now.
Yeah, and first of all, I just wanted to take some time and thank you, the listeners, for subscribing and listening. We've seen a lot of modest growth on different platforms. Surprisingly, YouTube has actually taken off really well. We've got over 100 subscribers there. I know that's not much to shake a stick at, but it's a start, and we really thank you for taking the time to check us out and share, subscribe, all that. We look forward to some more growth. I think that our trends are showing that we'll have, if we just kind of keep being consistent and having good shows and having good participation and good, social sharing, etc., that it will really shape up for us in the long run.
And we've talked about this before. Everyone knows that, but we've talked about this before, and James and I, we're working men. We both work full-time jobs. We're both married, and we have families. We have very busy lives, and this is a hobby, but it's a passionate hobby that we have, and we do everything. James has a background with web-based computer stuff. That's how much of an explanation I can give to that. But he helped build the site, all the analytics and background stuff, SEO. That's all him. So we manage all the social sites. We have Facebook. We have the blog on the website, lostriverlegends.com. And we have Instagram. And obviously we have all the platforms that we push content to. And so it's not something that takes just a little bit of time to do. For those that are familiar with all the work that goes on into a podcast, we're we're always busy, and we wish we could do more. We wish we could spend more time doing shows and getting guests, but in our spare time, that's basically what we're doing. Is we're very much cold calling people, basically, that we listen to or have heard about or have followed for a long time, and we have had a really good response with the guests so far, and we keep getting, seems like, bigger and better names. That I don't want that to sound disparaging to other guests necessarily, but these are just more prominent figures in their respective areas and in their communities, and we're really excited about it.
Yeah, and I think, our approach is a little bit different. I think every show's different. I wouldn't even really compare us. We've had a lot of, help along the way. A lot of people just kind of reaching out and just saying, hey, yeah, you're the little guy, I'll help you out. And I think that's, people taking a chance on us and giving us some of their time has been,
it's been huge.
A huge thing for us. Yeah.
It's been huge. And, a lot of these people that we've had on, we've had some guests on, they've just been so nice, very generous with their time. And, for a couple Idaho boys, just starting out in this, we're still very, very green, very young in the podcasting arena. But, we have big goals. Our sights are set on bigger numbers, bigger audience, bigger guests, and a wide array of topics, not just with Bigfoot, but with Bigfoot, UFOs, aliens, and a host of other things that we have kind of in a feather in our hat, so to speak, in our back pocket.
Yeah, and I know a lot of listeners have actually found us because of the Bigfoot topic, and it seems to be, I don't know, a rut that we keep going back into. It's a comfortable area.
Kind of a low-hanging fruit.
Low-hanging fruit. It's fun. But, spoiler alert, I was on the phone with Stan Gordon today, and just the crossover of, Bigfoot, UFOs, other paranormal activity, high energy, all these things kind of intersect, and it's not really, in our minds, we like to compartmentalize things and think this is this thing and it's this way because XYZ. And that's how humans like to rationalize and like to, put it into that, drawer in our minds. But we don't know where any of this stuff fits, and we're still trying to figure it out. And he's been doing this for 60 years, and he's still figuring it out. But
Yep.
He's got a lot of connecting points and stuff. So, that's kind of down the road.
Yeah, and Stan Gordon was on Sasquatch Chronicles, one of my favorite shows by far that Wes has done, and the stories that Stan told were just mind-boggling and really kind of turned my world upside down, because it's like you have these moments where you're like, how can things get any weirder? How can things get any stranger? And then you hear some of the stories that Stan has captured and has been told by eyewitnesses, and you're just flabbergasted. It's just incredible. And so there's a lot more to this, and we don't want to just share. Our goal is not to just share this information. That's one of our goals, but we really want to come to an understanding of what these things are, whether it be Bigfoot, UFO, alien, abductions, whatever. We really want to tie into, can we get closer to the truth? And there's obviously, like James just said, there's a correlation between these things, and it just keeps getting stronger and stronger.
Yeah, and I think, that's the best way to really explain it is that it's unexplained, and it piques our curiosity. It warrants looking into it and doing it the most methodical and scientific way possible that we can. Some things, again, it comes back to what I've always said, that there's just a pure entertainment value to things that, I probably use the mind blown emoji like 10 times a day, because there's just so many experiences, so many different data points that connect or that get exposed throughout, different YouTube channels I'm watching or different podcasts, different things. There's Tony Merkel's latest, the Confessional's latest episode 111. I mean, and all the stuff surrounding that.
It was crazy.
I was like, yeah, I wouldn't want that for.
And that was
anything.
tied back into, is it the Tony Martinez episode?
Yeah, so I think episode 91 and then that are kind of tied together. And that Tony Martinez episode was just I was re-listening to that, and it's so matter of fact. This happened this way.
Mm-hmm.
But like that whole experience is encapsulated into like a 20 years that then was like regressed.
Right.
Yeah.
And the 20 and back, program
thing
that they talk about. And for those of you who don't know, Tony from the Confessionals podcast and others have talked about the 20 and back program where, and James can probably explain a little better, but someone is basically taken by the government, sort of, but they're kind of digressed in age after they're put into this program for 20 years, and then their age regressed back to the moment that they were taken. James can fill in the details that I completely left out.
Yeah, so I mean, I cringe sometimes at the government,
Big brother.
Yeah, so I mean, because there's so much more. It's more shadow government along with what's allegedly a off-world presence and help with alien technology, and sometimes there's Nazi tech in there, thrown in there kind of loosely. But I mean, in context, for instance, you have Max Spears. He died this last year and was in mysterious circumstances, but he was interviewed by Miles Johnston of the Basis Project over in the UK. For years and years, he had interviewed him at different intervals, and they had different conferences and had him there. It kind of ties in with some super soldier stuff and some of the UK UFO stuff. But that name, Max Spears, he's someone that basically went through some of these programs and could speak to it. James Casbolt being another one along that line with, just going through the different stuff with Miles Johnston. That is a fascinating rabbit hole to go down. There's some of the early Bases series that he did were just, sit down interviews, and just very matter of factly they'd go through, yeah, we were, both born around the same time, and there's this base in Canada, and it's in the mountains, and and they just kind of just go through all this stuff, and then, oh yeah, we flew out on different missions, and we always went on a triangle aircraft, and all these, it sounds so like fantastical, but then you get different correlating points to this, where you have those guys, and then you have this Tony Martinez guy, and then you have this latest guy, I think his name might be Austin. So you have kind of 4 to 5 different data points, and these are things that these are things that
stacking
keep
up with each
stacking
other.
up and reoccurring, and they all flew out on different aircraft. They all say they went to Mars. They all say, they're there might be something to it. And what kind of lends a little bit more credence to it is with this latest Confessionals episode is some of the, I would call it gang stalking, or just gaslighting that this guy is getting, getting pulled over by
threatened
cops.
By his family's being threatened. He's being threatened. It was a fascinating listen, and Tony really knocked it out of the park with that one. And it's just one of the hundreds of stories out there that really, as you tie all the data points in and correlate everything together, things just don't add up. And but James and I, we talk about this stuff all the time. were entertained by it, but I think intrigued even more so by what the truth of it is, and who's some of the big players in these cover-ups, whatever you want to have it. Anyway, it's just interesting, and it was a couple weeks ago we actually sat down with my dad, and he shared a UFO encounter that we're going to hopefully get on. We're going to record and hopefully publish if we can get him to agree with that. But completely blew my mind. I'm 40 years old. He's in his mid 60s, and he told us something that happened that was in his 30s, and it just completely. you hear these stories, and when it's someone close to you, like in just the detail, you're just like, what is going on? And anyway, it'll be a fun one, and we hope to get that out soon. We share that with everyone, and yeah.
So you've got the different close encounters types, right? So close encounters of the second kind, first kind, second, third, and then fourth being abduction.
So when we were texting earlier, maybe it was yesterday, I can't remember. But I shared a story with you, and I don't know that you got to read it. But I pulled it up, and I want to hear James's reaction. I wish we could record this. I want to have you guys see his reaction. But I'm going to read it. So back in the day, there was a gentleman by the name of Bud Hopkins, and he was fascinated in the 60s and in the 70s. He was fascinated with alien abductions. As a young boy, he heard the radio program where they did the fake War of the Worlds, and he remembered that. And anyway, he's a UFO abduction specialist. And one of the stories that he shared, of all places, he shared this with PBS. It's a NOVA program, more particularly that's oversaw by PBS. But he related this very extraordinary story of an alien abduction that was a mass sighting alien abduction. I don't have enough information to tell you where it happened specifically, like the exact location necessarily, or the exact time and date. But I'm just going to read it. And so there's an excerpt of the interview between this NOVA employee. Her name is Linda Case. Actually, it's not Linda Case. I apologize about that. I don't have her name up right here. But here's what Bud said about that, and I'm just going to read that. So he said, the best case that I have ever had worked with was an extraordinarily important, and it's the subject of a book that I'm working on right now. And he has several books out on alien abduction. He says in the story, it involves a woman who was abducted, who I had worked with before with certain experiences revolving around abduction. She was abducted from a 12th floor apartment in Manhattan. She was floated out of the window of the 12th floor apartment, and in this case, the UFO occupants wanted this abduction to be seen for whatever complicated reasons. So therefore, it was not masked or hidden or whatnot. Even though it was 3 a.m, the woman was witnessed floating with 3 aliens below the UFO, which was 12 stories up, by a number of people, and he has heard from several of them. One of the people who I've interviewed at great length described her absolute terror when she saw this sight from the Brooklyn Bridge. Her first attempt to explain it to herself, this can't happen. She says, someone must be making a movie. This must be a movie because it's impossible, and yet I'm looking at it. There were other people on the bridge too, also terrified. There are people floating in the air, as they described it. People on the ground contacted me. They still have not wanted their names used. They've not wanted to talk to me personally for various reasons. but described exactly the same thing. I've gotten matching sets of drawings that everyone saw from their own perspectives. Another woman who I've dealt with at length saw the UFO right next to the building from which this woman was being floated out of. She said it was enormous. At one point, somehow, her car stopped, and the memories are very unclear from that point on, as if somehow or another, as often happens in these cases, there was some kind of effect, electromagnetic effect or whatever, we don't know what to call it, which stopped her car. And their memories only went up to that point of seeing the UFO directly above the building before the people floated out. I have another witness at another location, and here we have eyewitnesses of people doing impossible things, floating 12 stories up in a beam of light by aliens under a massive UFO ship. And this was seen in public. There's much, much more testimony connected with this, and some of this I am not liberty at present to disclose. And that was the Bud Hopkins case.
Wow. I don't know that I've ever heard that.
I haven't either. And when I saw that, I was just like, for the fact that it was public and not just like in someone's bedroom or in the backyard or, out in the farm somewhere. Right. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah. And, if you haven't been to New York City, it's probably one of the most jam-packed.
Oh, yeah.
Manhattan is just one
and
of
the
the
Brooklyn
most,
Bridge. I mean, look how much traffic's on there.
Yeah, it's nuts. So, any intelligent being would know, hey, we're going to be seen. There are cases where people report, something kind of cloaked and uncloaked, or it looked like the cloaking wasn't working, or, there's several of the better UFO videos that used to circulate, 2010, 2011 would have something that looked like it would be phasing in and out. There's something to it.
Yeah. Yeah, there is. It's, and there's another story in here about a girl, a young girl that Bud Hopkins had interviewed about. She was being abducted, and she saw on TV, a picture of an alien, with the almond eyes, black almond eyes, thin lips, teardrop shaped head, and it triggered this memory, and she just started freaking out. And she said, yeah, those are the things that take me at night. And they take me to a doctor that looks like one of them, basically. And just frightening, terrible things. Especially, you talk about some of these experiences with adults, and then you think that children could be going through the same thing. It's just disgusting.
One of the things I was the most scared of as a child was, well, first of all, robbers breaking into the house. We had someone break into our vehicle and steal our stereo, and for some reason that instilled fear, But the other thing that was almost as tangible as that was aliens,
Oh, yeah.
And, my dad would watch Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
X-Files.
X-Files wasn't around. It was Unsolved Mysteries.
Oh, geez.
And they'd have
Robert Stack.
Oh, they'd have all the, they'd have like a quarterly or, once a year alien special that was just almost focused just on that. And those would blow my mind, And then I also grew up with a very sci-fi home,
Sure.
V. You ever see
Yeah.
V?
Yep.
Tearing off their skin, eating rodents, and
Yep.
that was some freaky stuff.
I think we probably grew up in the same. We spent a lot of time with each other as we're cousins, with each other and the families. But that was kind of my growing up too. Is very much X-Files, Unsolved Mysteries was a big one. Science fiction movies like werewolf movies like Silver Bullet, Stephen King's Silver Bullet, and Reverend Werewolf, and Gary Busey. but Monster Squad, like, yeah, some of these old school ones that were just like very much part of my childhood and teenage life. And so, but besides that, I think our minds are tied into the same topics, where always thinking about like alien life and other planets and like stuff that's going on our own planet, and how that plays out in the big picture, and trying to find commonalities with all these things. And I think the big thing that's been on my mind is, are aliens, are they good? Are they bad? Like, how do we know if they're good or they're bad? And if they're even real, right? Or are they just projections of something else? Who knows?
Yeah, you get into just this area, listening to these different experiences. A lot of them, it's like, if 1% of what they're saying is true, then holy cow, like, watch out. There's also the tendency to, when you start consuming a lot of that, you start to kind of like, I don't know if it's a confirmation bias or something, but I read Dr. Jacobs' book. I'm trying to remember the title, but it's basically saying, so if you're unfamiliar with him, he took and analyzed a lot of people that went through hypnotic regression, and basically came to this conclusion that, there's kind of this break-off race that's happening, and they're basically trying to hybridize us with this species of aliens. And so that was his conclusion as, a scientist, based on the data that he had. And I had just finished reading this book, or was in the midst of reading it. And I was taking a train down to Oakland for my job, and I can't remember if I was going to work or coming home.
I remember this.
I remember seeing someone that didn't fit in.
You texted me like right after this happened.
Yeah.
And you were like freaking out.
This is years ago. And, I don't know if it was, I was hyper aware but it felt so, okay, let me kind of walk through it. So, I'm doing my thing, when you're on a train, there's not much interaction. Everyone's on their phone. I was on my phone. I look up and I see, I would say, a human. Okay, so a human-looking person, but imagine the eyes being almost twice the size, like the iris of the eye being twice the size, and the socket almost looking bigger too.
The orbit
itself. And I remember looking at that person and saying in my mind, like, you don't belong here. Like, you're not, you stand out to me, kind of a thing. Like, maybe, are you one of them, kind of a thing. And it was almost like they understood what I was thinking and were like, yeah, like, oh shoot, like I've been found out, kind of a thing. And they kind of,
got spooked,
got a little bit weirded out. Now, it could have been, I don't know, maybe I have a deadpan stare that's kind of intimidating. Like, oh crap, is that guy gonna...
But that guy's looking at me like I'm an alien.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. But, description, I would say, was probably a male in maybe late teens, early 20s, dark hair. And, that new film that's coming out, Alita, if you kind of see the proportion of her eyes, it was like that. Just picture that, but in person, and everyone's just kind of busy, head down. Most people probably wouldn't even notice.
So was this guy's head down, or was he was just up looking at people?
He's kind of, when the doors open, you kind of look up and see who's moving around, and new people come in, and, the whole cycle.
Okay.
It's kind of a whole thing depending on what stop you're at. So, but that experience, so was that I was hyper aware because of this book I had read, or was it, some information lining up with
your senses
with the experience?
Your senses are at like dialed at 11, and your mind's going 100 miles an hour, and your subconscious kind of build this construct of this reality that you're thinking of, but I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, that's one explanation, right? That kind of, when you're talking about that, it reminded me when I was, gosh, this was probably been at my current job for a little over 5 years. So this is probably like 9 years ago, 8 years ago. I worked at a financial institution as a lending specialist, a loan officer for consumer products, and there was no one in the lobby, and I was up on the teller line talking to some of the employees, and this guy walks in, and the training that we have at financial institutions is, you got the height markers at the door. You know where your cameras are for surveillance, and so every time someone walks in, it's like this training kind of kicks in where you're kind of like paying very close attention to their, colors of their skin, male or female, approximate height, their build, clothes they're wearing. I mean, you just pick out all these little nuances, and you remember them. You might write them down in case the guy comes in and holds a gun to your face and demands money, whatever. But I remember this guy walked in the door, and as soon as he walked into the lobby, I can't explain it other than there was this burning sensation inside of me, like a good feeling, like, and I haven't seen this person before in my life. And he was probably, at the time I was in my early 30s, and I would say he was probably pushing late 40s, and he was kind of a shorter male with glasses, Caucasian, just dressed in not like professional business clothing, but just, kind of a casual business. And anyway, I get this feeling, and I'm really paying attention to that feeling because it was something I haven't felt before when I've seen someone, right? And this guy looks at me, and he says, "Hey, Brett, how's it going?" Called me by name, and he kind of looks around the lobby, and he's just smiling. He's just very happy, just like I'm not feeling threatened. And he turns around and he walks out. Like, none of my employees recognized who it was. I didn't recognize who it was. So I was like, Jesus, this guy, is he like an angel? Is he some kind of ministering being? And I don't know, kind of freaked me out. But at the same time, it was something that I felt like was, I don't know the right word to use, but it felt good. Like it was a good experience, if that makes sense.
It's interesting. I think you're probably pretty attuned to your own senses and what we kind of all know based on different experiences throughout life, kind of how to gauge character and how to gauge a good situation or a bad situation. I think we all kind of know what that gut feeling is. And that's kind of how we have to investigate some of this information is, does it, you kind of have to weigh it with those experiences in the balance and understand, that, there's just that whole, well, I don't know everything. There's no way I'm ever going to know everything in this life. But, the level of humility, there's that, but also you're okay not knowing, you're okay. I'm okay, on the Bigfoot subject, I'm okay not knowing 100% exactly what is going on. Does it interest me? Does it excite me? Yeah. Am I going to go
Sure.
look for footprints this summer? Yeah.
We got a date. We got a date with Duke.
Yeah.
We're going to go up and hit the hills with him, hopefully. So
yeah, get up there and do a meet and greet. And, it's fascinating because it's just when you your brain starts to accept that things can possibly be real. For instance, when you hear from someone firsthand their UFO experience or their paranormal experience, it's different than hearing it on a show. It's different than seeing it on a YouTube video and someone kind of going right into it. It kind of brings it like another level closer to home. And that possibility brings an excitement, and it's hard to describe.
And I completely agree. And I think once we started this podcast and we started talking to people who had firsthand encounters or were even just specialists in this topic or a topic, it really, my understanding of this, I guess my worldview of it, of these topics really changed. Because I agree that once you hear these stories from a person's perspective, like when my dad, he came over to my house a couple weeks ago, and James and I sat down, and my dad's like, "Hey, this is what happened. Here's my Bigfoot encounter. Here's my UFO encounter." And, they're not earth-shattering, but I was blown away. And I think his UFO account was probably much bigger of a story than his Bigfoot story. But yeah, once you hear these things from the horse's mouth, from people directly, it really changes things, because you can be in front of someone. You can read their body language. You can read just those telltale signs of whether or not, is this person lying? Because if they are, they're doing a stand-up fantastic job at it. And I'm sure that there's people out there that do that they just love to lie. They're really good at it, and they love to share a story and have people believe them. Probably doesn't happen very often, but it has to happen. I mean, if just looking at the data, it's happening out there. It's a small scale, but that's something that excites me, is actually hearing stories from people directly, versus just listening to a second or third hand account story necessarily. Not that they're any less convincing, but hearing it from a person, it definitely changes things.
Yeah, and you get there's any direction that you can go off in. There's the Phil Schneider experience. There's the whole deep underground base subject,
which is a whole thing in and of itself.
Yeah, Dulce, Phil Schneider. There's what's his name? Anthony. I'll have to look him up. There's an investigator that's been out there and had kind of a Men in Black experience trying to investigate the Dulce Mesa area. I think it's called the Archuleta Mesa in Dulce. Anyway,
okay.
So I mean, there's just so many different avenues and subjects to pursue. There's the Montauk Project. There's the Secret Space Program. There's
Project Blue Book.
Blue Book. That kind of makes me mad I don't have access to watch that new series, because it kind of rings a bell with me, just as far as production value. It's a Zemeckis produced, directed, kind of close to the heart there with the Back to the Future stuff.
Sure.
Race on that stuff.
Yeah, those, there's a lot of things. I'm kind of fascinated with the underground bases that are supposedly in Antarctica. Fascinated with the tunneling system under certain states that are really high concentration, especially in Kentucky. Vast statewide underground system of caves. There's just a lot of high strangeness that are specifically focused around things like that. And I was actually talking to James the other day, and we were talking, and I was like, I was wondering why there's so much airspace, controlled airspace, militarized airspace over the poles. And I think we were sharing back and forth of Linda Moulton Howe, video that she was doing on the Antarctica bases and different things. And I was like, I wonder if it's so heavily policed up there by military, if they have stuff coming in and out of those poles, because there's apparently entrances up there, cave systems up there that are like ginormous, and kind of made sense to me at the time. But yeah, stuff like that, it really kind of keeps my blood going. It just excites me just to think about. And anyway, yeah.
Yeah, I think that particular video that you're bringing up was released fairly recently with Linda Moulton Howe.
Mm-hmm.
She's an Idaho native, so we're hoping to get her on eventually. If you hear this, please come. But she's a very well documented person, very composed, she's good at getting her sources the right way in a very journalistic way. I think that has really helped her present the idea and connect her data and present that in a very professional way. So this particular video, though, she had a Navy SEAL or former Navy SEAL that had allegedly gone down to Antarctica and had flown on some transports and had protected a team that had accessed a area under the ice, the surface of the ice, that was octagonal and black obsidian type
and green.
And, yeah, and so
just weird colored.
They gained access to rooms that were 20, 25 feet tall, backlit,
super thick walls.
Yeah,
self-illuminating rooms, like with no known light source. Yeah. Just crazy stuff.
Yeah, just the subject, but it's like you got to just kind of keep taking all those data points in stride and kind of collect them into that mental drawer that I was talking about. It's like, okay, Antarctica, okay, different civilization, different tech, different stuff that we don't,
all these. Yeah. I think David Wilcock does a great job at taking in all this information and like spewing out a cohesive sentence or like statement that really sums up multiple subjects, on these various subfolders of topics, and it makes sense. And he's someone we follow quite a bit, and I think he's onto something. Some people might say that he's not, and he's kind of a fluke, and he's just playing the game, but he's been doing it for a long time. Linda Moulton Howe has been doing it a long time. They all have a lot of skin in the game, and we'll keep listening to these guys. We'll keep following up and seeing what they have to say. And my biggest thing is especially some of these people that have been doing this for decades. You got Linda Moulton Howe, you got Project Camelot, and other people. Richard Dolan, like you got Corey Good. I kind of want to go back and look, what was some of the first stuff that they were talking about, and did that come true, or was it validated somehow, and see who has been, I guess, most accurate like throughout the years, and maybe that'll shed more light on who to follow, who has the most reputable information that they're disclosing to the public. Who knows?
Yeah, I think it's tough territory too, because you have people that they make a living on it. They make a living on the information, but I think there are people that are really good at gaining information and getting good sources and putting it together in a very cohesive way.
Mm-hmm.
And those are the people that kind of bubble up. You have some people, and then there's skeptics, and so there's some of that infighting. I find it interesting that Richard Dolan recently has kind of dove a little bit into the cryptid area with
Duke
talking about Bigfoot and getting into. He had a Dr. Meldrum interview.
Oh, that's right. That's right. I was getting confused.
And
there.
I'm starting to see a little bit of crossover there, which is interesting because that's we're doing a little bit of the opposite. I mean, obviously
yeah,
he's
sure.
way more prolific and way more, kind of goes deep on those different subjects. But it's interesting to see the timing of now he's coming over to the Bigfoot side, and
we're heading over to UFO.
headed towards the UFO area.
Makes you wonder if he's putting a pause on the UFO stuff, or if he's found something out about Bigfoot that's really give him pause to turn things around and really focus that energy on that subject.
Yeah, and I think he's someone who, from what I understand, he didn't start off being like, I'm going to be a UFO researcher. Like he was a accredited journalist, and he went into things, kind of dipped his toe in, and then his other toe kind of got stuck, and here we are 15, 20 years later, and he's still pretty authoritative and pretty good at presenting some evidence of different things. So he's a good kind of access point. I really like his work with deep underground bases stuff, and just a good all around guy.
Yeah, as we continue to grow here on Lost River Legends, it's our absolutely on our list to get as many high profile guests on as we can. We really want to. We don't want to, and we just don't want to necessarily regurgitate the same stuff that's been going on. We want to ask different questions, maybe offer a different perspective, and really have a unique view and a unique take on things. And as we get better at this whole podcasting thing and interviews and tying everything together, it's going to take more work, and I think we're ready for it. I mean, our personal lives aren't slowing down anytime soon necessarily, but it's exciting time. I mean, we have information, access to information at our fingertips, in ways and in speeds that we have never had ever in the history of the world. And so it's pretty awesome time to be woke, to be awake, right?
Yeah, I think that going about things in a more open-minded way. Again, kind of bringing it back to my phone conversation with Stan today, he was saying there used to be a lot more like legit scientific researchers that were into this. He's like, some of them have passed. There's only really a few left, but the ridicule and the just negative connotation that came along with stuff has really, I would say it's brainwashing. It's whether it's it's kind of in the culture as a ridicule. It's kind of built in.
You're talking about like people that have seen stuff that don't want to come forward because of public ridicule.
There's that, and there's also just scientific,
just the professional side.
Yeah, just the professional scientific side that looks at things objectively and that actually is more of a skeptic to finding what's going on, and then having them, once they start investigating and digging in, going, okay, there's something here.
I agree. I agree with that, and I can completely see that. And I think we saw that on a different level, maybe between Dr. Melba Ketchum, and our conversation that we had with Dr. Meldrum about the Bigfoot or the Sasquatch Genome Project, and just the infighting in the scientific community between both sides of Melba and Meldrum. I don't want to peg Meldrum as the leader in as the antagonist in this. He just had some things to say about it when we interviewed him. But I think you're absolutely right. There's a lot of scientific, like, hey, if you're going to focus on this subject, you're going to lose your funding, or you're going to be ridiculed and marginalized by your peers and your colleagues, and that's not worth it for some people. And so they bow out. They put their head down and they keep doing what they're supposed to be doing. You're going to quack like a duck. You're going to quack like a duck. And I can't say this. I mean, if someone said, hey, you need to stop focusing on the stuff that you're doing on this podcast. You're going to lose your job. That would put things into perspective. Like, I don't want to put my family in danger or in financial stress. But some of these people might be facing that. Who knows?
Yeah, I think that's been a tool that's been used for years and years and years, just that whole livelihood being threatened. It doesn't necessarily even have to be, dark forces. It could just be corporations that, want a certain reputation. Hey, we don't want you associating with that.
But with that being said, there's a huge... it's been going on for a long time, but I think it's especially bad now is the infighting, whether it's in politics. I mean, we see it in politics like right now, like every single day, the Democrats and the Republicans and Trump and not Trump and yada, yada. And, you're being socially and publicly crucified if you say something just a little bit wrong. Or you say or look outside of the norm, and we see that in today's society. And so, as people research these topics, that kind of marginalization is not going to go away anytime soon. And I think it'll get worse, actually, as things continue to move in the direction they're moving.
Yeah, I think, there's a lot to be said for the whole keyboard warrior thing in social media and hiding behind the screen. I think that we have seen a negative shift, but I think we've also seen the opposite of that, where, you can share a story that's positive and it has impact. You have people asking for help that couldn't before. There's a lot of dichotomy to things, but when it comes to conflict is always going to be continually fomented and continually agitated, and we talk about class distinction, things like that, things that really we shouldn't be focusing on the differences. We should be focusing on the things that make us the same, commonalities. And I always say, 90% of us could get along 90% of the time if we actually just, put aside those differences and just, learn to coexist without such high judgment.
And I can't remember what interview it was, but it might have been with Meldrum. But we had talked about something similar to that, where if we could just put aside our differences, like how quickly we could probably solve the mystery of Bigfoot or Sasquatch, whatever you want to call it, in a scientific way, not in any other way but scientific necessarily. But even in the non-scientific community, there's so many different like sub-layers and groups that focus on tracks, groups that focus on sightings, witness sightings, groups that focus on just insert whatever here. But if everyone helped focus and had a unifying effort into finding whatever the truth of it is, without any like personal vendetta or personal focus, and it was just this collective unified effort, things would move along much quicker. And I think that's the same with almost any category, any subject that's out there.
Yeah, there's a lot to be said for that. Without getting too philosophical, I think that there are people that have, most of us do have that desire to have some kind of semblance of unity. There's big events and things in life that, it's interesting just kind of thinking back. I was just thinking 9/11 on that subject. It was a very unifying event. For lack of a better term, it's fascinating how something so terrible can do that. But it's also, I've had different experiences. Like I remember watching the Gulf War be launched. I remember watching the David Koresh compound be assaulted.
Oh, huge. Yeah.
I remember I had the day off of school when the Oklahoma City bombings happened. And then, all these
And then
different
9/11
and 9/11 and then just kind of everything since. And it's like the Challenger
Sure.
space shuttle. We had a whole space unit because I lived in San Jose. We toured the NASA Ames Center for a field trip. We had astronauts or scientists come and show us the tiles that are on the space shuttle. Like, we were prepped for that big launch, that big event where a teacher's going into space. It was like the biggest thing, big assembly, in our lunchroom, all of us all watching intently when that happened and when that went down. And it was just one of the most tragic things. It's so interesting to think back about each of these tragedies and how just being witness to them and how over time it almost becomes just such a normal thing. I don't know if it's a normalcy thing.
Yeah, I can see that. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I don't know that normal is the right word, but it's, but when we see, I mean, we have access to media, right? And so we're collectively, the citizens of this planet are collectively watching, especially with 9/11. I think that was the biggest by far. There's so many people tuned in, listening and watching every little moment. And I think anyone that was old enough when that happened, they can probably, once you start talking about it, it's gonna trigger like the most accurate memory stream of what they were doing, what they were wearing, where they were at, how they were feeling, who they were with, what time of day it was, what the weather. I mean, everything. Like I go back when that happened, and it triggers so many like memories for me. But I agree. I think, there's this normalcy to things like that happen. These huge events that really transcend everything else that's going on in your life at that time, and really heightens your senses, and everything's just ramped up to much higher levels. And it's interesting how it works. I mean, it's terrible. I remember my dad. You mentioned the Gulf War. It was Bush Senior, right? I remember my dad. He came and woke me up, and he says, "Hey, we're in war now. They just started firing missiles, and it's full on right now." And he wasn't excited. That's the wrong word, but he was just like so into the moment. Like, this is history. Mm-hmm. This is history that we're seeing, and I want you to be a part of it, even though it's terrible. I need to inform you about it, educate you about it, and tell you what I know about it, and look at what's going on. You need to be a witness in this.
Yeah, and I don't know what I was going to say next. Sorry, you can cut that part out. Yeah, when it comes to, I didn't want to discount the fact that those things were traumatic. I didn't want to discount the fact that that mass tragedy, that mass psychosis, is actually could possibly be one of the aims of why that happened. Whatever you feel, or whoever you feel did what, the impact that it had
on the collective conscious.
Is that what
you mean?
Yeah. Just the whole, there's so many aspects to it, and there's so many. I have some personal feelings I don't totally want to get into, but I mean, I tend to question things a little bit when it comes to, like, hey, United We Stand being a motto, that was printed on stickers within. And I felt like you saw a United We Stand. That was like the PR delivery piece that came out so quickly after that, and it just didn't sit right with me watching that unfold in that way.
Like there was a commercial capitalization
almost that, but it was like a tagline that had been coined, that had been like, this is how we're going to brand this event, of how it impacts us. Now, it was a uniting event, and it was something that brought people together, but
for what purpose?
For what purpose? And there's so many different theories, different motives, different things going on. PNAC documents, you have Operation Northwoods, you have people that think it's a particle beam, people think that it's a modified airplane, you have people thinking that it's a nuke in the basement, you have people thinking it's nanothermite, you have people thinking it's aliens,
you have people thinking it's all holographic.
Yeah,
like literally all the planes and some of the other events were all holograms.
And to me, it's like, you kind of, again, it's like, I can't run in any of those directions 100%, but that there's different connections, people being told not to go in, different 3-letter agencies being in that building, Israeli company being in that building. You have just a lot of weirdness.
Yeah.
Just straight up weirdness.
The gold
on that day. You have that white plane that was in the sky flying over. You have the black helicopters hovering outside. You have
all the gold.
The gold
went missing from the World Trade Center.
The gold in the supposed basement. You have separate bomb blasts. You have the alleged terrorist passports still intact. You have
all of them, pretty much too.
Just so many little pieces that you have to go, well, it's probably not how we were told. Same with JFK. Same with any which.
Well, it's hard because if. And again, we're not going to get into this, but I'm going to throw this out as just kind of a carrot. But if there was a nefarious inside job with 9/11, if they're going to know that people are going to be chasing all these carrots, right? Does that make sense? I mean, yeah, look at this money that's missing. Look at the gold that's missing. Look at all the things that don't add up. I think the citizen science, the citizen investigation, the collective efforts of the citizen, the citizenship of the United States that's interested anyway, and that has 2 cents to say about anything. I mean, they're going to know people are going to try to be putting things together. So that's where I get tangled up in. I mean, especially now that we have, 9/11 was forever ago. And look at the advancement in audio and video recording. I mean, the phones that we have, like, you can record different things in 4K. And I think that kind of leads into our next subject about this UFO that we wanted to talk about in Utah. We'll get to that in just a minute. But, I think it's harder. It's going to be harder and harder if there is a bigger power at play with some of this stuff. It's going to be harder and harder to get away with it. As technology in the hands of citizens increases, and our will to pursue truth increases, and the collective efforts and just the collective drive that everyone has to find the truth, it's going to be harder and harder to overcome, in my opinion.
Yeah, more and more ways to capture information and to share it and to
absolutely
get it out live time. You have a lot of different gatekeepers involved with that, with the different shadow banning and demonetizing and things like that. But, when it comes to, I had something else I was going to say during it.
Say something else.
Say something else. Sorry about this. Sorry. I think okay, so when it comes to you know, the 9/11 subject, just to kind of put a cap on it, you have a lot of things going on there. You know, you have the air that wasn't right to breathe. You have the evidence shipped to a foreign country and melted down. You have the 9/10 revelation of trillions missing from the Pentagon. These pieces, the way they line up, do not feel right.
I think that's a good way to put it.
That's probably the best way to really kind of leave that. But I think that the average Joe knows, but it's just that kind of cognitive dissonance that, like, you know, the people that talk about it have been called truthers, and the people that present a different side of the stories are conspiracy theorists. And it's like, well, the conspiracy theory is the actual story. The official story is the conspiracy theory, because there's no way that that's how that went down, based on just very surface, cursory level information that you're leaving out, or that you're painting a certain way. So
yeah. Okay, 9/11. Boom. Mic drop, James. James is dropping his mic right now. No, but we wanted to talk. You know, we talked earlier about some of the things that we wanted to discuss in this episode. And one of the things that's really hot right now is both James and we focus on. I say we're very particular in who we follow on YouTube. Some of the channels that we access, some of the names that are out there that we really, and James is much better about this than I am, but he's very good at really narrowing down on some of the top people that are most legitimate in these their areas of expertise. But one of the channels that we are very vigilant in following is Secure Team 10. And Tyler over at Secure Team. Hey guys, this is Tyler with Secure Team. Like, that's like his standard intro, and he's just an awesome channel. But one of the things that he had on recently was this drone footage, and I want to say the original was 4K. You know, these little drones that go up with these high resolution cameras, very stabilized footage and gimbals and all this technology. These guys in Utah were shooting footage. I just want to say it was stock footage that they were planning on using for B-roll for something. I don't know if they're going to sell it or if it had some other purpose. But anyway, these guys got their camera or their drone up in the air. They're flying over this ridge top. And it's really hard to see in just the regular playback. And I think the only reason you can see it, if you saw it in 1080p or even 720 resolution, as it was natively being recorded, you probably would have missed it, because it's a small streak that happens across the footage, but it's actually probably the most compelling UFO footage I've ever seen. Period. Like, for me personally. But anyway, there's a lot of Tyler and his people at Secure Team. They do a really good job at stabilizing the footage, adjusting contrast and different elements in the video to make things stand out. But it's a really good video. Basically, drones going over. It's taken image of this canyon and this little berm, and then you see this UFO that's probably they estimate 2 miles away, and it streaks across in front of the camera, and they didn't even notice it until after the fact. But what did you think about that when you first saw it?
One of the most interesting things for me on that was the trajectory of it, because it wasn't just a straight line. It kind of follows the contour of this ridge and then comes down.
It's like a Nike swoosh almost.
It does this, like it's banking and then levels and then just boom. And it's super fast. Like, and it'd be easy to chalk it up as like, oh, it's a bug, it's a bird. But there's been some debunking on that. Mm-hmm. And then they think that they've clocked it based on the frame rate and measuring distances.
Yeah. So we shared on the blog a video. I don't know if we shared the original video with Secure Team on the blog. I'll have to pull it up. I'm pulling it up as we're talking right now, which is terrible, but it's the how things work. But on the blog, we have the original posting. We posted this on January 30th, so it's been a little over a week ago. But there's a guy. I'm going to pull it up so we can I want to see who it is. It's Brian Hanley, is the owner of the video. It's his channel. And he actually published this on the 30th of January. But he uses like Google Earth. He has like a really high version of Google Earth. And he's getting like the coordinates getting the coordinates of the GPS coordinates of the drone, and he finds a location on Google Earth, and then you have a lot of measuring tools that you have on Google Earth where you just drop a pin and you can measure. So anyway, he guesstimates it's actually quite accurate based on his breakdown of the video. It's about 2 to 2.25 miles away from the drone, and based on timing and how quick it comes into frame, they're estimating it's between 7,200 to 9,000 miles an hour.
So you're talking Mach 7, Mach 8
plus. Yeah. I mean, it's cruising. And I was telling James, I was like, geez, if stuff's out there flying that fast, no wonder we're not seeing. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that people see, but if there's more out there, but they're going so quick that we can't even see them, like, no wonder. But this just happens to be, I mean, this person was in the right place at the right time. And I haven't seen any video. I mean, to be fair, you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket with this, but it's been debunked as not being a bug, right? Flying across the frame, or an aircraft. But it's crazy. It's actually a really good video. And once you zoom in on the frame and you got that resolution there, that really saves it for me.
Yeah, and just as better technology gets more affordable and into the hands of people that want to democratize it and use it for whatever,
Mm-hmm.
We're going to see more of this on the cutting room floor, kind of a thing. It's just, I've been fixated on this new camera, the Rilo camera. I just want one so bad, but it shoots in 4K in 360 degrees and is stabilized. So picture, Survivor Man going into a Bigfoot scenario and going into the woods and doing his thing, but he can't watch his 6 all the time. Well, this camera can. And
it's like having a GoPro like all around you at the same time.
But it's stabilized, and the fact that you can, after the fact that it's recorded, scrub back through and focus and zoom on areas.
Yeah, you're like, hey, I'm going down the hill on my mountain bike, and that's cool to see, but what does it look like from behind? And you can just rotate your image, and it's all there. All the data is there.
Yeah. No, I'm so excited about that prospect. Like, if I was going squatching, I'd have one of those up on a mast, some kind of, I don't know if there's a gimbal system for it or whatever, but it's already super stable the way that this tech is. GoPros are getting more stabilized just out of the box without a gimbal.
You got the DJI Osmo.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. It's pretty awesome. The little DJI Osmo, it's a little 4K gimbal. It's just a handheld camera, really. It's just tiny, but fully stabilized, 4K, shoots in 60 frames a second, and it's just crazy. And it's like the size of a marker, like a Sharpie marker, or the fatter square tip markers. It's crazy. And, if.
Yeah. We always talk about what we would do, if we had all this money and all this time and money to burn, but
The Squatchmobile, jacked up Jeep Grand Cherokee.
Yeah, it'd be something.
In all her glory.
I don't know. It's, we all like to fantasize about that kind of thing, but honestly, like we're having a ton of fun just shoestring budget doing a show, and
Yep.
It's super rewarding to talk to some heroes and some people that have really had an impact.
It is, and it's pretty cool, and some of these guys that we've had on, I mean, a lot of these guys are older. We're in our late 30s, early 40s, and some of these guys we've heard about and known about for a long time, and it's pretty awesome to be able to access them and interview them and correspond with them, before their time's up. And I guess anyone's time could be up whenever, but it's pretty awesome that we can kind of archive these stories and have these experiences and share them with you guys. We're totally stoked for that.
Yeah, and without droning on too much, we can't do the show without people listening and sharing, and we really appreciate all the participation we've had so far. We've had some positive comments, some positive reviews on Apple iTunes. That's been really helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've got those reviews without even asking people to do it. Like, we got some 5-star reviews. I think there's 7 out there total, and a couple typed reviews. And it helps. It makes us feel pretty good about what we're doing. And we're always self-criticizing. I think ourselves, pretty hard. We're harder on ourselves than I think others would be on ourselves. But we're always trying to improve the show and do better with what we have. But we're glad that people are listening. We're glad that we have a following, and the engagement is awesome. And we just can't say thanks enough to everybody.
Yeah, and if you're feeling generous, if you want to help us out, we're open to the idea. We have a Patreon page. We're hoping to get some different levels on there eventually, but right now, just very minimal budget. So we'd appreciate that. It's patreon.com/Lost River Legends.
Absolutely. And as I was finishing cutting up one of the episodes, I took a picture. I have a wide angle lens on it's kind of cool, a wide angle lens on my cell phone, and I took a picture of the workstation in my wife's sewing room where our little setup is. And pretty awesome, actually, that we have the space to do things with. But check it out on Facebook. Just find us at Lost River Legends on Facebook. Just do a search. You'll see our logo. You'll see our page, and you can see our little studio. We're big fans of Richard Serrett, and he says, before I dim my lights under of my studio beneath the stairs, and I keep thinking, yeah, that's us right now. Like, we're in the basement under the stairs, basically, and it's pretty fun. But as James said, any help would be awesome. We're very much appreciative of the listens and the follows and the likes and the shares and the subscription to whatever platform you're listening to. But if you find it, if you find it in your heart to help, 100% of anything that goes into Patreon would be going right back into the show.
Yeah, and one of the things that we haven't had much of is a ton of user engagement, as far as like people reaching out and saying, hey, do this on your show, or have this person on. So if you have suggestions, we're on Twitter now. You can drop us a line on Twitter.
Instagram.
There's Instagram, there's Facebook, there's different platforms. And of course, directly on YouTube comments or on the Podbean comments. So those are all ways that you can get a hold of us, in addition to our whole contact us section on our site. I mean, there's a plethora of ways that you can do that, but we keep chasing these different names, Linda Moulton Howe, Richard Dolan,
Dr. Sala.
We
We have, let's see here, George Knapp, Travis Walton. We've reached out to some awesome names, and we've gotten some response. We've had some communication back and forth. But we're little guys. We're not paying anyone to come on. We're not being paid for this. And so if someone does agree to come on that's pretty high profile, they're doing it as a favor, and they're sharing an hour of their time, giving us a couple of these Idaho boys a few of their minutes. And so, but yeah, we're working up to these points. We want to get bigger and better names on. Gives us more exposure, gives us more access to their research, their knowledge base, and gives us a chance to sit down and talk with them, and that's priceless. And we get to share that with you guys.
Yeah, and in the future, we'd be able to announce like, hey, this is the person that's coming. What's the question you have? I think that's something that's totally within the realm of possibility. Because that's something I always wish I could do, is be like, oh, you're having this person on, ask them this way, word it this way.
Yeah.
But that's why we have a show now, is so that we can ask the questions that we want the way we want to. But if you have something you want to be exposed or asked, definitely communicate. We're looking at new ways of communicating. We're kind of playing around with different platforms and Discord chat and things like that, to see if there's some way that we can get more engagement with people that are interested in these topics in our show.
Absolutely. Anyways, that's going to be the end of our show. Ladies and gentlemen, we're so glad that you listened to a couple of these old guys here just chewing the cud and talking through some of these subjects. Anyway, we'll talk to you guys later. Thanks again, and we'll see you on the flip side. Take care.